Let's turn our attention to other stories now. Lagos has officially joined the League of Oil-Producing States in Nigeria, and just recently, President Muhammadu Buhari ordered the NNPC to intensify exploration efforts in the northeast of Nigeria.
With these developments, there are concerns the search for oil will continue in most states of the Federation. In the case of Lagos, engineers have been on the search for crude oil for more than 25 years, and Governor Akinwumi Ambode says the doggedness of the engineers is commendable. Let's listen to the governor before we go into the discussion proper.
Due to efforts over the last 25 years, we are in a position to call Lagos State an oil-producing state. We found oil in Lagos, yeah, fine. How do other people find oil in Lagos? And how do we go from, 12,000 barrels a day potential to 50, 100,000 barrels a day potential? Because it's there. And so we will request and also solicit, which I know we have tacitly, but we will also request further support from the state government to help us to develop this basin. This is the first basin that has been discovered outside the Niger Delta in Nigeria.
Well, I want to showcase you as a very good example of a dogged entrepreneur, of somebody that believes in made in Nigeria, because that's what you epitomize here. The government has always been saying that we all need to look back inwards and start to do things for ourselves. Spending 25 years to get to this stage and be able to bring out something productive, it shows a lot about your belief, your tenacity, your doggedness. And I want to commend it to every other Nigerian businessman or every other Nigerian investor that there is still greater hope for Nigeria. And with the likes of you, I don't see any reason why any Nigerian needs to be afraid anymore.
Now the search for oil continues, and more states, especially the north, are eager to break records as exploration begins.
Some states in the southwest are not also giving up on the search as efforts continue to relieve the country of total dependence on the south-south for oil.
Now we're joined now by an oil and gas expert, Bala Zaka. It's good to have you join us.
Thank you.
And welcome you to the breakfast program.
Thank you.
And also joining us from Abuja studio is the president of the International Institute for Petroleum, Niyi Ayola Daniels. Niyi, good morning again today.
Yeah, good morning, Nigeria.
All right.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. Let's start off with Bala Zaka in here. At this time when the world politics of oil, the paradigm is shifting. America is striking shale oil, and we know all about the oil crisis in the global. At this time, discovering oil in the new state, Lagos State, for instance, and others are exploring for oil. How beneficial is that for Nigeria?
Well, it's not. You don't even need to bother starting from the point of the benefits.
No.
Some of us have always pointed out straight away that this continuous gospel preaching of foreign direct investment is actually a misnomer. We've always been saying, why can't we start thinking about internal domestication and local direct investment? Because first of all, like I said, there is this saying that the seed of growth and development can only be planted on the soil of peace, and it has to be an internal soil. So when you start thinking of foreign direct investment, meanwhile, local conditions are not there and are not good and are not attractive, nobody will come in to contract. When you look at Nigeria, first of all, Nigeria is actually a gifted country. Niger Delta Basin is just one out of 7 potential sedimentary basins. You have the Calabar flank, you have your Benue Trough, you have the Chad Basin, you have the Sokoto Basin, you have the Anambra Basin, you have then the Dahomey Basin where this discovery was made, and you have, of course, the prolific Niger Delta Basins. At this point, ordinarily, we're supposed to know the reasonable, with reasonable degree of analysis and guess what our potential is in terms of crude oil. Because like most of the time when we talk about gas, we said Nigeria proved potential is about 187 trillion cubic feet of gas. But potentially, Nigeria is actually having 600 trillion cubic feet of gas. And when you say something is potential, it simply means if you deploy the necessary technology based on time and dynamism, that endowment that you think didn't exist will actually be there or actually exist. So based on our endowment, I think we should be proud to want to know the real potentials we have.
Okay. Mr. Ayola Daniels, let's redirect that question to you. The question Mike asked our guests in the studio is, now that even the price of oil is plummeting, and even those who buy our oils actually are not discovering oil in their own area, wouldn't want to buy our oils, should the clamor for discovering oil in Lagos and the Northeast, if there is an appreciable reserve there, should it be something to rejoice about?
Well, thank you very much. I think it is it's appropriate to calibrate this discussion in a very well articulated manner. Number one, we read in the news that the President Buhari has directed the NNPC to intensify search for oil discovery in the Northeast. Well, that was what we read in the papers. If that statement is true, I have my reservations. Why? Inasmuch as I want to commend the President Buhari for different nationalistic approaches towards solving our issues in Nigeria, I've had at different times commended his initiative and that of the Minister of State for Petroleum in trying to find solutions to some of the issues we are presently contending with in the Nigerian oil and gas industry. But on this point, I think the President is off point. Why did I say so? You see, oil exploration or oil discovery is not achieved by politics. Neither is it achieved by presidential fiat. Oil discovery is not a matter of politics. Oil discovery is a matter of geology. The geology has to be right. It is not the politics that has to be right. And I want to say that President Buhari should please be aware of the fact that in the same Northeast, that basin that we're talking about, acreages were awarded to Shell, Chevron, Total, and Egypt several years ago. They made different attempts to look for oil in this part of Nigeria. All their discovery was in the negative. What I'm saying here is this, that we should be very careful in making political statements or trying to grandstand politically by trying to use a command approach, a command and control approach towards solving commercial issues. I also want to say here that in 1958, when oil was discovered in Nigeria, it was not a presidential fiat by Sir James Robertson or Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa that I have the greatest respect for that brought about oil discovery in the Niger Delta. What brought oil discovery in the Niger Delta was as a result of the fact that the geology was right. The paradigm shifts of that basin for Nigeria, for that, the geology of that, the reservoir mechanics for oil discovery, and the geology technique was right.
All right.
And that was why oil was found.
Okay.
even the oil that is found by our neighboring countries, Niger and Chad, it was the IOCs that took up a commercial assignment on their own initiative, because when there is commercial viability for oil and the geology is right, you don't have to beg the IOCs, the international oil companies, to look for oil. They will find the oil.
All right.
It is not the president of Niger or the president of Chad that gave a presidential fiat that oil should be found.
All right,
in Chad and
Ayola,
Niger.
we'll come back to
I
that.
also want to say that
Ayola, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. Just take a breather. We'll come back to that. Let's just churn out this information so people can have a proper calibration, according to you, of exactly what we're talking about.
Now, but before we go into all of those, because I'm going to take them to my Baku as usual to give them a perspective. But let me bring in Balazaka here. Let's understand the basics. Lee was talking about it's not supposed to be a product or a fallout of presidential fiat, as the case. But we know that oil exploration, anything that concerns oil, crude oil generally, is on the exclusive list of the federal government, which is supposed to be on the table of the president or federal government to explore. Now, if the president says, okay, there are potentials from the studies we've got, there are potentials in the northeast or in the part of the north for there to be oil discoveries and all of that, would it be just politics for him to say, companies A, B, C, go to the north, find out, do all the geological this and that, and see if there is oil in deposit that we can use? Is there anything wrong in that?
No, it depends, and that's why you see when we talk about Nigeria, Nigeria is supposed to be a country that we are supposed to be enjoying, but sometimes Nigeria tends to look very, very complex. And Nigeria tends to look very complex because sometimes we can be very sectional, we can be sectarian, and we can sometimes be political. But honestly, if we're going to look at Nigeria in national interest, then when it comes to positive potentials, we should be able to explore them. And when it comes to even calamities, we should actually see national calamities as national calamities and probably approach them as Nigeria. With due respect to the speaker, I mean, from the way he was speaking, you will agree with me that he's probably a very intelligent and eluded person. But you see, like when you talk about potentials, like that was why I was trying to explain potentials. Potential simply means, that thing you think I have today, you understand, depending on the mechanisms and the technicalities you use today, may not exist. It's just like sicknesses. In those days, when you talk about sickness, they said, okay, based on the analysis you will do today, somebody may not be having malaria, but you'll be surprised tomorrow, depending on the tools you deploy, that person is having malaria plus, and the rest. Why do we call them potential basins? We call them potential basins because based on basic reservoir rock properties, these basins have those properties or qualities. So the question is this: if in five years ago, based on the technology you could deploy then, you couldn't discover something, 10 years after us, just like the technology of phones, the GSMs when they came, before it was grang. Now you can see somebody's picture. So technology is actually like that.
The Lake Chad Basin,
yes.
If it's part of the basin you're talking about, this northeast falls within the Lake Chad Basin, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, and the exploration has been on for more than 20 to 25 years to 30 years now.
Yes.
And nothing has been discovered. Is that correct?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the best I can tell you is I don't have access to the information. It's just like the RJ field, I mean, it has been there, the works have been there for probably 25 years from what we had. And I can tell you, I even provided service in RJ field, that field that was drilled. I provided some service like probably 10 years ago, 5 to 10 years ago. And really, it was like nothing was going to be there, But some years back, these things are discovered. And one thing again about oil and gas business is this: it's a very, very expensive or capital intensive business.
Okay.
You don't make these geological discoveries or finds and you just throw it out like that. most of the time this information remains proprietary till everything about the analysis is done, then an announcement can be done or can be made. As far as I'm concerned, the Niger Delta Basin, even the Benue Trough and those areas, I've not really seen the results of the analysis, the detailed analysis. Until I see that, I cannot tell you if it is something that is commercial or marginal, or if there are no fines. Okay,
according to the Northern Nigerian Development Company, which belongs to the 19 northern state governors in Nigeria, of course, they signed an MOU, and in 2006, this matter came up. But particularly, according to them, each of those oil wells that they are going to drill around and find is going to cost about $20 million for each of them. Do we have such money right now?
Well, first of all, like I said, oil and gas business is very expensive. You know, it's a capital intensive. To drill a particular well is normally you spend millions of dollars. But you see, the first thing is this: we're not talking about 19 northern governors. So when you look at it from that, we're beginning to now sectionalize these things. But the truth is this.
But it belongs to them.
No, it doesn't belong to them.
The company is Northern Nigerian Development Company.
No, you see.
And they came together in 2006, signed an MOU. So
at
that's
this
a
point
fact.
now, I may go into congruency with NII, you know, with NII. It's you can call it, that initiative must not necessarily be a government initiative. It can be a private initiative, but what I try to do is this: look at it, first of all, as a national asset, because it is not the northern governors that will determine whether it should be called, whether that part of the country will be called an oil-producing region or not. It is not the northern governors that will determine what you should do in terms of corporate social responsibilities or the derivation of this or the setting. No, it's a national asset. So first of all, if it's a national asset, in national interest, anybody that wants to go there and try exploring should be encouraged. So if the northern governors as a consortium now wants to do something about that, then they should be viewed just like probably the private companies, like he was saying, the Shells, the Chevrons and that. Because even governments of respective states can come together as a bloc and decide to do something. So that is the way we should look at it. But by the time these things are done and the final discovery is made, it should be seen in national interest. Some cubic feet of gas or barrels of crude oil should be seen and valued, and communities and people should be treated just the way ordinarily or ideally the Niger Delta will have been treated.
All right, so it's about the national asset, it's about national commonwealth,
First of all,
not the issue of the north or the east. Or
but individuals, a region can decide to explore or embark on a project.
It's okay. We'll come back to all of this because there are basic understanding we need to have about the politics of oil and the issues of
calibration.
Oil. Yeah, calibration. Those are terms certainly that. All right, we still have NII Ayola Daniels with us in Abuja studio, but we'll come back to all of this. It's time for the news update now, and Kemi Foladeyemo is standing by to take us there. Kemi, is all yours now.
On my quest. Budget and National Planning Minister Udoma Udoma disclosed this to State House correspondents at the end of this week's Federal Executive Council meeting in Abuja. Well, one person was killed, 6 others injured after a gas explosion in Damaturu, Yobe State. The Army spokesman for the 27th Task Force Brigade, Lieutenant George Okukwe, confirmed the death and said the injured were in hospital. The cause of the explosion hasn't been made public, but explosive experts have been deployed. Also, a petrol truck fire has burnt goods and property in Benin City, Edo State. The truck was coming from Auchi when it fell and burst into flames. A new group has broken out from the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB. They are now identified as the rebranded Indigenous People of Biafra, TRIPOB. Spokesperson of the splinter group, Chima Philip Efiongosuji, says the decision was taken at an emergency meeting by some members unhappy with what they call the defeatist position of IPOB. The new group says it will make a public denunciation of the secessionist Biafra Republic and set the Biafran flag ablaze at the Eagle Square in Abuja on October the 1st. It will also unveil a new Biafran flag. Well, Well, back now to Mike and Busolami for more on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you, Kim.
Get me for the updates.
Thanks for staying with us on TVC Breakfast. The topic right now is oil discovery exploration in the northeast. That of Lagos has been discovered, so exploration will start soon. But that of the northeast is what really is the thorny issue this morning. And we have our guest in the studio, Balazaka, here with us, and another guest in Abuja studio, Ayola Daniels Ni. Many thanks for staying with us, gentlemen. The discussion continues, but Mike is taking us to his wall.
Well, I'm going to take them to my wall soon. But before then, Ni, let me come to you on this. Now, the issue of, we know the certain terms have been used: land degradation, environmental degradation, oil spills, issues of marginalization, 13% derivation, the politics and all the complexities that come with the issues of oil in the Niger Delta over the years that led to so many issues we have right now. Now, Lagos joining in the League of States with Oil Exploration, what are the implications from that window?
Once again, I think from a strategic from a security point of view, energy security point of view, it is very strategic that oil has been found in Lagos State, particularly the gas element of it. But before I amplify this point, I want to take our mind back to something on this aspect of oil in the north. I agree completely that it is important for us to identify every area of Nigeria, either it's inland basin, onshore, offshore, that has the potential for oil and gas discovery, that is the hydrocarbon. Because in today's world, hydrocarbon remains the lifeblood of industrialization. That is without a doubt at all. But the question is this: in the management of natural resources, that is, in the management of the money that Nigeria has, we must be careful in ensuring that we use the money appropriately. Government has no business in putting so much money to look for oil in the northeast. Private investors who believe that there is oil there should do that. I think that it is a misapplication and a wastage of taxpayers' money to do that. And I'm saying this very, very cautiously, particularly because we are presently in a regime of low oil price. There is no money in Nigeria. Then why should we use so much money, billions of dollars, to look for oil to be spent by the federal government? I think if the geology is right, if the geoscientists, the geophysicists, geologists believe that oil can be found in that part of Nigeria, the basin, then it should be done as a private investment venture. That's the one point. Then the other point I want to make here is that Northeast has huge comparative advantages in many areas that are low-hanging opportunities for the Northeast, that I want to use this opportunity to plead, particularly to plead with Mr. President, that money that is being looked at or has been reserved for oil exploration in the north, a quarter of it should be used to do the following. Number one, that is to use it for the comparative advantages that Northeast has. Number one, Northeast has a unique comparative advantage in solar power capability. We can build solar farms from all around the Northeast because of the comparative advantage that Northeast has. Northeast has coal in Ashaka to generate power. Northeast has limestone to expand the cement production. Northeast has the Mambila, which is the second biggest tower in the whole of West Africa. Northeast has the opportunity to do conservation for the Lake Chad. Northeast has the opportunity to expand the navigation of River Benue, particularly at Yola. You know, that should have been a major gateway for river transportation of goods and services. We need to open up Benue River at Yola. Particularly when you go to River Benue at Yola during the dry season, it is so dry that you can literally walk across several miles.
All right.
All right, but the issue there is you're talking about the fact that government should divert all the monies, so to say, earmarked for this exploration into all these areas you've said. These are very capital expensive ventures generally. If they can do that and the northeast or the north also has potential for oil, what's the difference? Why not oil? Maybe it's just one out of so many options.
Now, let me answer that. You see, the age of oil, the age of oil is gradually coming to an end, number one. Why? Technology is changing the landscape, and is changing the landscape of oil itself as an asset. You see, shale technology has brought in so much more oil into the surface. There's oil all over the world. The world is oversupplied with oil. That's why the price is falling. America's reserves for oil storage, it has filled up, kind of, literally. And there's so much, the whole world is awash with oil. So, rather than looking for oil so much, we can look at what the other side to our economy, because the move from oil as income is gradually dwindling, is gradually dying.
All right,
down.
Nee, I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to come back to you shortly after now. Let me take everyone to my wall now. We've been waiting for this. I know Busalami has been asking for me to go to my wall. I'm going to my wall now. Let's have a basic understanding of what this is so we can have other perspective. Now, oil reserves are found all over the world. Nee has just said that, and certainly Balazaka also mentioned that earlier on. But some countries have produced more oil than others, and that is because they have a larger deposit of oil. Now, can my producers put on this? Now, key areas with largest hydrocarbon reserves on Earth. Now, from research generally, there are about 4 basic areas where you can strike oil anywhere in the world. And first, it is the desert. Now, in the desert, we have seen countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like Yemen, countries like Dubai, and in the Middle East generally, they have benefited from, they have cracked oil from this deposit here from geological findings. And then we have also the river deltas. Nigeria is one of those, and certainly our south-south region is one region generally that we have benefited from. We fall in this category. Now, the 4th area is the Arctic area. That's somewhere close to the North Pole, and generally countries that are found around there, certainly countries like Russia, countries like Canada, and so on, they fall in this category. And then the other one is the offshore margin, where the ocean is generally found, the one we call the offshore drilling generally. Certainly, Balazaka is going to talk to us more about these areas. But it is generally believed that deserts and Arctic areas hold the largest hydrocarbon reserves on Earth. But there are other important locations of large reserves. They include river deltas, like we said, and continental margins offshore. Now, together, these 4 types of areas hold most of the oil and gas in the world today. These are the breakings. Balazaka was giving us, within Nigeria, was telling us about the Benue region. We're talking about the Benue Turf and the
Sokoto Basin, Anambra Basin,
exactly.
Chad Basin, Calabar Flank, and recently the Dahomey Basin.
Good, where Lagos also falls.
Yes.
Fine. Now, certainly that falls under this category, but let's move on. Let's move on to have other understanding to this. Now Nigeria's oil is predominantly sourced from the coastal Niger and Delta Basin in the south-south region generally. And in fact, that region has more than 150 oil fields and more than 1,000 oil wells. And these oil wells account for 95% of the country's oil production. That is because Nigeria has only sourced for an oil in just one of the 4 reserves we talked about earlier on, and that's the Niger Delta region. If we move on now, certainly apart from the south-south region that we have talked about earlier on, the southeastern states of Abia and Imo are also oil-producing states in the country. And Lagos State just discovered oil. We've been talking about this, and it falls in the southwest. And apart from Lagos, Ondo State is another state in the southwest, or the only state in the southwest that has been involved with oil exploration and has discovered oil. But exploration is already ongoing in the Lake Chad Basin. And let's move on to understanding that now, yes, I gave you this earlier on as in the 4 basic breakages or categories where oil can be discovered generally. Now, the big question is, why is Nigeria depending on just one option for oil exploration, and which is the Delta region, the River Delta region that we have talked about? Let's break it down for better understanding. Earlier I mentioned that deserts and Arctic areas hold the largest hydrocarbon reserves on Earth. The other 2 are river deltas and continental margins offshore, and that's according to a professor of engineering and applied sciences at Columbia University, Professor Roger Anderson. Now, of these 4, let's see how Nigeria has fared so far. Let's move on now. Now, river deltas. This is the area where we have over the years depended on oil and exploration and enjoyed the status Nigeria has. We have Bayelsa State, River State, Cross River State, Akwa Ibom State, Delta State, Edo State, and Ondo State. Certainly we still have Imo and Abia State amongst them. Now, these states are today known as the oil-producing states, and that's because Nigeria has tapped into river deltas as a form of oil exploration. If we move on, let's move on to understanding this. Now, deserts, that's where you can find oil reserves again, and they are basically in the northern part of Nigeria. If you go here, you see certainly from Kebbi State, Sokoto State, down to Kano, Katsina, Jigawa State, Yobe State, and Borno State, you have the desert area we've been talking about. And in fact, the Sahara Desert, which is the biggest desert in the world, connects Nigeria's northeast to the other parts of Africa. And these other African countries like Libya, Angola, Chad, Sudan, South Sudan, Cameroon, Egypt, Equatorial Guinea, and Congo all have deserts and are all producing countries. Let's move on to understanding this further. Now, continental margin offshore, that talks about the coastal lines, especially the Atlantic Ocean. Certainly, if you from this map here, you see this area generally where the shore stops, and there are exploration in those areas where you have the Atlantic Ocean. And that probably explains why Lagos and Ogun states in this area, generally, this area here you find states have announced the discovery of oil. Now, moving on. Now, oil reserves are also found in Arctic areas, and the Arctic consists of the Arctic Ocean and parts of Alaska in the United States. And we talked about USA, Alaska in USA. We have Canada, we have Finland, we have Denmark, we have Iceland, Norway, Russia, and Sweden. Certainly, the Scandinavia and some of these countries, Russia, they found themselves in that region, and they consist of an ocean and adjacent seas with a seasonally varying ice cover surrounding treeless permafrost. That's a term that certainly Balazaka might explain to us. What is the permafrost?
First of all, once you are done, I think I'm beginning to wonder if we need to consider you for honorary PhD in geology. So go ahead.
It's all right. Now he'll explain to us what the permafrost is, but then we don't have that in Nigeria. When it comes to the ice cover and all of that, we don't have that in Nigeria. But let's move on now, certainly. Now, 19 northern state governments have appointed a British firm to carry out exploration activities for oil and gas in the Lake Chad and the Benue Basin. Now, this is the covering of the 19 northern states. But certainly, Balazaka has told us earlier, it's not about the politics of the north and south or anything. Anybody can come together. An association can come together. Like minds can come together and say, let us put resources together and see if we can have this, because there are potentials everywhere in the country. But NIA, on the other hand, has said that let us focus on the potentialities here, the comparative potentialities in these countries, because the politics of oil is changing. So let us see how we can look into new areas, new inventions in energy conservation and alternative energy that can help. Now, a total of 1,962 square kilometers have been acquired and processed Interpretation is currently ongoing at about 90% completion, and drilling activities will commence by the last quarter of 2016. Now, if we go, now findings have shown that hydrocarbon might be found in Yobe or Borno states. And for instance, Chad is landlocked, but they discovered significant reserves in those basins. And checking the Lake Chad history, it favors deposition of hydrocarbon in these two states, finding in commercial quantity. That's in Borno state and in Yobe state. Let's look at other oil-producing countries of the world that do not have river deltas in here. Now, what this means, okay, fine. We don't have that on this slide right now, but the key 4 areas, what this means is that the other 3 options I mentioned earlier, deserts, Arctic areas, and continental offshores, have not been tapped. And let's break it down a notch further. But let me go to Balazaka in here. When it comes to the issue of potentials, it seems Nigeria has a lot of potentials. We have the offshore margin, we have the potential rather. We have offshore margin, we have the desert, and so on. Exploring all of this is going to be really expensive to really go into the investment for exploration. And in the current situation where we have economic challenges, social challenges, and all of that, how desirable is that for the government to look into exploration of oil right now?
You know, it's very strange, you know, when you hear people saying, trying to paint a picture of how Nigeria ordinary shouldn't have been. You know, but first of all, I want to clarify something, you know,
yes.
like you were explaining, you know, when you were talking about the different parts of the world, you know, and how you get oil. You see, in the case of Nigeria, you classify them mainly into 2. You have what you call the coastal basins, and you have the inland basins. The coastal basins are the ones very close to the coast, you know, so that's where you now have the Niger Delta Basin. You have the Calabar flank, and now the Dahomey basins. Then these ones that are a bit far from the coast, you call them inland basins. You see, one thing about crude oil is this. Due respect to NII, what NII was trying to, you know, you ask him first of all about what will now happen to the Dahomey basin and how it should be treated when you compare it to the Niger Delta. So I will address that. We are supposed to actually talk about what have been the lessons we have learned in our treatment of the Niger Delta Basin. Not only whether Pota, Ijo, or Ishekiri, or Niger Delta Basin and the endowment there. What have been the lessons learned? And now that we have discovered another basin, you know, with potential like Dahomey Basin, Lagos State may not end up just being the geological there. So how are we going to treat them? Are we going to have special Avengers from there? Are we going to still be having biodegradation without bioremediation?
Yeah.
That's where lessons learned is, you know. Then the other one really that NII was explaining, we could do this, we could do that, we could do this. That one actually has to do with accountability of leaders. When you have what? When you have revenues from a product. Because there are so many countries in this world that are monoproduct economies. But what they did was to diversify. I always give example of places like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, or the UAE. They have so much oil, but you go to like United Arab Emirates, they are living on tourism. Right. They are living on other things. But in the case of Nigeria, it's actually planlessness and the non-deployment of the benefits we make that has made us not to benefit. And let me explain quickly. It is not falling prices of crude oil that made us today not to have fertilizer plants in Nigeria. It wasn't falling prices of crude oil or low oil prices or whatever that made us not to deploy ecological funds to take care of the erosion that is ravaging the southeastern part of the country, the desert encroachment in the north, you know, and the flooding in the south. It is planlessness. And what that simply tells you is this: we should differentiate between what planlessness and lack of accountability, you know, of our leaders has caused us. It is lack of accountability that led to the non-development of the other parts of the country.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. The ecological fund, some states actually got funds from that, and even some.
So like the
actually got
Mambila he's talking,
but really,
the
okay.
this,
So
the
let's
that,
go
that
to
is
yeah.
deployment of that benefit from
All
that
right.
crude oil revenues.
Let's go to Ayola now in Abuja. Basically, Nigeria is not new to the issue of flouting orders when it comes to gas flaring and environmental pollution in the Niger Delta. This issue has been on, and Nigeria recently just signed another pact to have a zero routine gas flaring by 2030. So if they go ahead and discover oil in the northeast, what do you think? What are the checks and balances that should be put in place so we don't have what is happening right now in the Niger Delta happen in the northeast?
Okay, thank you again. Well, if eventually oil is found in the northeast, I'm hoping that it will be a private sector-led initiative. Of course, government will have to appropriately come up with the different regulations that will govern gas exploration or oil and gas exploration generally. And I'm aware that presently the government has about 3 new policies they're about to roll out now. There's a policy that's about to come out on oil policy. There's a policy on gas policy. There's another policy on fiscal policy. All these policies are designed to ensure that the mistake that we made in the past in the area of gas flaring issue, in the area of pollution of the environment, they are being tackled. But they are tackled not from a command and control approach, but rather they are being tackled with commercial initiatives being put in place. There are all kinds of incentives that government is looking at that would encourage utilization and development of gas, and also to put in place the appropriate checks and balances that will prevent situation whereby you have massive pollution of our environment and gas flaring all over the place. So I think that is what we should be looking at. I am not particularly, I'm not saying that it is not wise for us to look for oil in the northeast. But what I'm saying is that it should not be the business of government to spend so much money to do that, especially at a time that we don't have so much resources. We should be a good manager of the resources that we have in terms of the income that we have, which is meager compared to what we used to receive as oil revenue. I mean, if you're a good manager, if you're a manager of an income coming to you, you should be able to sit down and ask yourself, if I invest billions of dollars to look for oil, and at the end of the day, I find the oil, and I have to sell it at such a low price, then you need to really look at the economics very well. You need to look at that economics very well. That, is it something to look at? Is it something to put in so much money? Or rather than using oil as an income, why not look at the area of processing?
All right.
Processing of products, because that is where the world is moving to now. Because the only way you can get incremental value on your crude is to process that crude or to refine the crude. I've made that point earlier when I appeared on your
all right, Nii,
so what I'm saying is that
Nii, I'm going to come back to you.
The age of oil.
Yeah, Nii, I'm going to come back to you shortly after this. We are up against time, but certainly I'm going to bring in Foladele in here to give us a reaction of Nigerians on social media concerning this issue. Fola, it's good to see you. Good morning.
Mike. Good morning, Salami. Good morning to our guests. All right, so very insightful and I would say revealing conversation, and it's one that has raised a lot of questions about who is funding, who should be funding this this plan, and what does it mean for Nigeria. And of course, oil is one of the major things we're known for, but are there other options that we should be considering? So let's see what people are saying online. All right, so at Chukwu Debelu is saying, the day erosion in the southeast is accorded the same presidential attention as oil exploration in the northeast is the day I will believe in Nigeria. Next one here is from at Blank Beats, and he's saying, once oil is discovered in the north, it won't be only Igbos that will be calling for independence. Oil in Nigeria equals laziness. Next one here from Chisomething, and he's asking, can states in Nigeria carry out oil exploration? Is it the sole right of the federal government? And I believe Nee spoke about this earlier. Next one is from Shakson, and he's saying the opportunities beyond oil in Nigeria are way too much. If we can invest in agriculture quite well, our GDP. And last one here is from Zar OHM, and he's saying the discovery of oil in Nigeria leads to a saddening tale. We neglected all other sources of revenue and focused solely on crude. And of course, this is a question I think is worth, this is a tweet or a reaction I think is worth discussing. Is, like I said earlier, is oil the only thing that we should be considering?
Like
are there other things?
You'll be flanking Nee's ideas. Really, that's basically
that's Nee's stand.
So are there other things that we should be considering for our economy?
All right, Fola, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We don't have all the time, but I like Balazaka just to make one comment on the one reaction there that says oil equals laziness in the state.
No, you see the question. You go to other countries. Like you go to Saudi Arabia, you go to
in the Nigerian context.
It is the Nigerian planlessness. What you do is you use the revenues from oil, to develop your economy and grow your GDP.
But those are the ideals.
Quickly, can I say something on gas? You see, it's just like when you look at gas. Some countries are only having gas. With only gas alone in Nigeria and the thermal stations, we should be having electricity.
Okay.
When you talk about oil, we don't have single functional refinery. There is no internal domestication, and we cannot still be talking about oil in Nigeria. We just have to do something about that.
All right. Balazaka, thank you very much. There's so much to talk about on this topic, but I am going to maybe prevail on my producers for us to have the second leg of this discussion so we can have a better understanding. Balazaka, thank you very much. I will talk to them. That's what I said. But Nii Yola Daniels, thank you for talking to us on TVC Breakfast. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right.